Are you satisfied with your understanding of sustainability? If you are not, imagine a journey together, a pluralistic one, with academia, innovators, startups, NGOs, all looking for solutions to the greatest challenge of our time. My name is Samuele Tini, and this is the Sustainability Journey.
Welcome to a new episode. Today we are going to discuss innovation and coffee with somebody that is coupling technology to help farmers and companies to become sustainable and compliant. And we are doing this today with Peter Horsten, who is the Chief Growth Officer of AgUnity. Thank you so much, Peter, for being with us today.
Great to be here, Samuel.
Peter, coffee is one of the most traded commodities, and of course, there's been a lot of debate on the impact of the value chain, especially on the sustainability, on the environment and deforestation. But before that, our question for our guest is, who is Peter? Can you share your personal sustainability journey?
I started working for the Dutch telecom company. I've been working in the Netherlands as a consultant on the edge of business and IT for close to 10 years. And then I started my own software development company in Poland, in Gdansk. And somewhere on that journey, we became a software developer for Fairtrade International in Germany. Together with them, we developed a solution to basically trace the payments of premium money. Because as probably the listeners are aware, when you buy Fairtrade, you pay an additional premium on top of the normal market price for coffee that goes back into the community to develop schools, infrastructure, and all these kind of things that really support the local communities. But those money flows we traced, and therefore we supported them in developing a solution for that. When I started working with them, I really started realizing what a positive impact digital technologies can have on, in this case, emerging economies. And rather underdeveloped value chains. And that's where I really started realizing how sustainable you can also apply technology in this matter. After that journey, I joined AgUnity. And AgUnity is a company that already for 8 years aims to empower smallholder farmers with the help of mobile technology. And the idea is that if a farmer can record their history and can show that proof of history towards, for example, a bank, it will be easier to get finance. And that's true. But only those projects were really small and hard to scale. So that's why we decided at a certain moment to move more towards the cooperative level or the producer organization level, farmer organization level. Different names are being used for that, to support those organizations to organize themselves better and therefore build these profiles, farmer profiles with their history of trade on a larger scale. And we are seeing now that is indeed attracting the interest of banks, insurance companies, because all of a sudden they have structured data that they can use, reports they can use to analyze these markets. So let's say my sustainability journey combined with technology is now 8-9 years.
Fantastic. And I really like that because we can see that our innovation and technology, especially in this decade, in this moment that we are in, where we have discussed in the pod about robotics, we have discussed about AI, and then we have discussed about how the wave of technology and technological transformation can also help solve the problem of sustainability. And you're doing it with value chains and farmers that sits in emerging market, especially. And sometimes they have been historically at the shortest end of the stick or in the value chain. And on that, especially you have focused a lot on the coffee sector. And I want to ask, from your perspective and your work that you have done, what are, before going into the discussion about AgUnity, about the challenges that they are facing in the coffee sector, particularly the smallholder farmers, and really how these impact even the overall value chain?
I think the biggest challenges that the farmers are facing are related to change of climate. The environment is becoming quite unpredictable for them. And at the same time, market access challenges. They have to work rather hard to products ready, to have them harvested. Then they need to be transported through the countries. And then we place quite serious hurdles on market access now, for example, with the EU deforestation regulation. And not to speak about the fact that they then also receive quite a low price, especially if you compare it towards what you pay for a bag of coffee, or even worse, a cup of coffee at one of those beautiful coffee restaurants. If you have a look at what the farmer earns versus what the retail price is, then that's shocking. Depending on what method you use, it's less than 10% of the retail price, and that's very uncommon in most commodities. So for the farmer, it means that they are basically on coffee they cannot live. At the same time, we see that their productivity is not necessarily great. So there is still a lot of improvement to be made, but that improvement might need investment. They claim that they don't have the money to invest. I'm not going to judge that, because I also think that some entrepreneurship is missing. When I was visiting Ethiopia last year, we went into the field and we were comparing the yield of Brazilian farmers with them, with Ethiopian farmers. And the productivity of Brazilian farmers is way higher. Now, that's not fully fair to compare, because Ethiopian farmers are smallholders, small pieces of land under trees, so the fields are not very efficient. They cannot harvest mechanically. They cannot maintain plants that easily mechanically, opposite to the rather high production fields in Brazil, where you can do it mechanically. So we cannot fully compare it, but still there is a potential to significantly increase productivity. But they will need to taught how to do that. Ways to do it is by better maintaining their plants. I've seen bushes sky high, which is completely not efficient, because there goes so much energy into that plant just to sustain the plant, right? Not even to grow the berries for the coffee. So a lot of teaching will be needed. Some materials might be needed, because they have a lack of basic cutting knives just to cut the branches of the bushes to maintain them. But there is also an emotional thing, because we were discussing that with several of those farmers, and then they said, yeah, but I cannot cut this plant because it was growing when I was a kid. So there's also a lot of emotion involved. So we need to professionalize the production. That will already help them to become more resilient for climate change, but as well to produce more, and producing more means in general more income. At the same time, we also should take care a little bit about market hurdles that we are introducing, and maybe even there should be a willingness to pay a better price, which will of course result in higher consumer prices, because the current price for coffee is not really sustainable for the farmer, at least.
And I think it's a fair assessment that I can also witness every day working here in East Africa. The work we do with farmers, supporting with new plants, new technology and production and new varieties. And really what you said, there is all the value chain is issue from the production side, where maybe you get 2-3 kilos instead of the 8-10 of some other plants, to, of course, the market hurdles and the pricing. And along the way, especially technology can start removing those boulders that they are there on the journey towards a more sustainable, more fair and transparent value chain. One of the things, and also the discussion, there's been a lot, also here in Kenya, in other countries, there's been a lot of discussion about the EU deforestation regulation. So I want to ask you if you can explain to our listeners that might be not familiar with that piece of legislation, how this regulation can affect commodities, and especially here coffee, and what challenges and maybe also opportunity do you foresee, especially for the smallholder farmer that you have visited in Ethiopia and Kenya, with how they can comply with these difficult standards?
Yeah. First of all, at the moment, when we are recording this, we do not fully know what the legislation will look like. And maybe I should start with explaining that first. Although the legislation has been accepted and it was supposed to come into force from the end of December this year, at least for large coffee importers, smaller coffee importers and producers, that they are called operators under EUDR, into the European market, would have to be compliant half a year later. But all of a sudden that has changed, because the European Commission has proposed to postpone the enforcement of the law, so not the law but just the enforcement, because the law is already active, it's in place. And the European Parliament had to approve that enforcement delay. What has the European Parliament done? They have proposed and accepted a few amendments, which means that the whole negotiation had to start over again. The current situation is that both the European Commission and the country representatives, which form the council together, have not approved these amendments. So literally, tomorrow, negotiations will take place in between European Commission, Council, and the Parliament. And then in 2 weeks, there will be another vote. So by the time you release this, maybe it's known, but I assume that there will be a enforcement delay by 1 year, because it will be impossible to start reporting for the majority of companies, basically from now, not knowing what is going to happen. Let's assume that there will be that 1 year delay. What does that then mean? According to the law, it doesn't mean anything for the producing countries. That's what the EU keeps repeating as well. But of course, that's not the reality. Basically, the first obligation starts with the importers of certain commodities. And under EUDR, we are talking about coffee, cocoa, but as well palm oil, rubber, cattle, forest, wood, all kind of products that the EU has decided and concluded add the most to deforestation caused by consumption by the EU. So therefore, they want to prevent that deforestation has been caused by European consumption of these goods, these commodities. To do so, importers have to basically audit their value chain, whether or not there is a risk of deforestation in their value chain. And that demands that they really know every origin of, let's say in this case, coffee. And that becomes quite complicated when you have to deal with smallholder farmer value chains. And that's also why, for example, last year, a lot of buyers all of a sudden stopped buying from countries like Ethiopia, because they were afraid that the coffee they were buying last year would already be under EUDR. Because the coffee, the resulting consumer product, let's say, could be placed into the market after January this year. Because when you buy coffee, you do not directly sell it, because you buy green bean that you might roast way later, then it would come onto the market under EUDR. That was the thought. So they stopped buying from smallholder value chains because that was way too risky. And it is, because it's quite complicated to validate and to monitor where coffee is coming from when you are dealing with hundreds of thousands of smallholder coffee growers, and across the globe it's millions. But in certain countries it's really a large number. So what is now happening is that all these coffee countries, all these coffee cooperatives and unions have to digitize the location of every farmer. So they need to have a GPS location of every farmer they are buying coffee from. Because when you sell your coffee to an importer, that importer has to announce to the European information system that an order of coffee will be coming in. They will have to add a so-called due diligence statement showing that they have verified their value chain, that they have checked, they have performed a risk assessment or a due diligence assessment, meaning that they have verified that that coffee exporter or coffee cooperative can really prove where their coffee is coming from, that it's traceable, and that it's coming from locations that have not been causing deforestation. And causing deforestation means that forest that used to be forest on by the end of December 2020 has been turned into agricultural soil. To be honest, for coffee, that's quite hard, because we should realize that a coffee plant or a cocoa plant takes about 4 or 5 years to grow before they can bear fruit. But still, we have to prove that the farmers where we are buying coffee from cannot have caused deforestation. So that means that a coffee buyer in country, whether this is an exporter or a cooperative, needs to register all the farmers they are working with. They need to visit them to take the GPS coordinates of their land. If it's above 4 hectares, they even need to take the polygon of the land. So they need to walk around the full land, let's say, to record the borders of the land. And then they need to verify that information with European forestation map, let's say, of the date by the end of December 2020, to prove that that location did not cause deforestation. Now, there are all kinds of services now available to do that, and they have gotten quite a lot of interest. But in my opinion, this is the smallest challenge that we are facing, because now we know, let's say, which farmers are safe, which did not cause deforestation. So we know we can buy from them. But still, when I'm going to buy from them, I need to be able to trace the coffee across the value chain. So I have to be able to prove that I was only buying coffee from safe farmers and that there has no illegal mixing been taking place. And that's quite a challenge, because that basically means that you need to register every transaction at the washing station in a digital way, and that you will also have to register the bags of coffee that are leaving the washing station, and you need to follow them across the following processing part, because in country, quite often, also an additional processing moment might take place where, again, coffee might be mixed from different origins, different washing stations, maybe even different regions, because some blend will be created. Before you then sell that coffee to a European buyer, you will have to add all the potentially originating GPS locations. So all the farmers that potentially have been providing coffee to that container of coffee, let's say, that you sell, you will have to provide all the GPS locations of those farmers. That can be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 GPS locations that you have to share with your client. I think it's quite realistic to say that you cannot do that on paper, because that will cause all kinds of errors. So we will have to do that in a digital way. It will also have to be imported into that European information system in a digital way, although initially they were planning to do that manually, but that wouldn't work, of course, because you really get a lot of data points when you work with smallholder farmers. This process needs to be digitized, and that's what and this is what roughly EUDR is about. And so the legal obligation lies with operators in the European market, importers and larger processors and retailers who place coffee into the market. But the obligations are trickling down towards smallholder farmer organizations, because they will have to provide the information that will give that feeling of trustworthiness towards the buyer, to make sure that that coffee is compliant. And now we were only discussing the location. They will also have to provide evidence that they are legally compliant with international, national, and regional legislation. And that's a big concern for a lot of buyers, because they have something like, how do I know? How can I verify? So there is also a very important role for exporters, cooperatives, maybe even in-country organizations, to make sure that there is a repository of verifiable data, for example, around land ownership rights or land usage rights, which especially in Kenya is quite a challenge to prove, that I've heard, because basically you would like to take a picture of the land ownership, but farmers are not really keen to share that document, because they are afraid that it will be manipulated and that someone else will then claim to be the owner of the land. So although sometimes doing this from a Western perspective sounds very straightforward, we will just do this, we will just digitize this. This is not so straightforward in the countries we are talking about and we are dealing with. And we are dealing with farmers who have not gone through this digital transformation that we have gone through in the West, which took us 40 years. And we now expect these countries to understand what we are doing in a few weeks. That doesn't work. And we are also dealing with a lack of understanding how something like that would work, and that fear that something can be copied is true, right? Maybe it has even happened. So we cannot walk away for that. We need to care about that and find ways how we can then validate it without forcing them to share such a document. So yeah, a lot needs to happen in the field to match these two worlds, where you would just say, oh, let's just digitize this whole value chain. But the people we are working with don't have those experiences, don't see that value, basically see more the potential drawbacks than advantages. Yeah, that's something we need to deal with.
It's very interesting, and thank you for the discussion, which is also an awful lot of work. And then I will do the question, then who pays for all this work and everything? But of course, we want, so what you stressed is, of course, the technological solution for compliance and to support. And I can see how innovation and technology can assist really farmers in all this cumbersome journey, and which is also the role a special solution like AgUnity in that enhancing efficiency and sustainability.
I think you have a very valid point there. There is now a lot of focus on digitizing for compliance. But to be honest, that's a very poor offer, because that doesn't bring them too much, right? You could say, yeah, okay, you could say it brings them market access, but they already had that market access. So basically they have to do something to continue having market access. So that's not gaining something, that's basically defending something. So from that perspective, there is no urgency, no willingness, no reason to really do something for them intrinsically. It's really a defensive, a must-do thing. And that's also why we say we should not do this for the sake of compliance alone. We really should do this to make that all the data they will collect, thanks to this effort, will remain with them. And the big risk that I foresee is that many exporters or importers will come with their own solutions, basically demanding farmers to provide a lot of data, and the data is gone because it will be owned by the buy side. I think the real power would be if we really leave the information officially with the farmer, but maybe with their producer organizations, and that we will then say, how can we use this data to make the whole process more efficient, more effective? How can we use this information to benchmark farmers? Because when you know what a certain farmer is producing on a certain piece of land with a certain amount of plants, and you see that the farmer who's joining a certain maintenance program over time is really increasing their yield, that is information that you can convince them with that they might have to change their approach. Because a farmer is not going to change their approach when I visit them, right? Why the hell would they listen to me? They have been taught by their ancestors, and that's the information they trust. And I cannot blame them for that. So we will have to show that certain interventions pay off. And I've also seen that there are farmers willing to experiment. So with those kind of champions, let's say, we will have to cooperate and then start certain interventions that then, based on data, we can also prove that it works. And that should be the real power of this digital transformation, according to us, that they're farming, running their cooperative, that becomes more information driven, whereas now it's more intuitive driven. And I'm not going to say that we cannot use the intuitive. I think we should blend the two, and so that we can really say, okay, yeah, that works and that doesn't work. And I think that is going to be a big game changer. So we should not just digitize for compliance alone.
And it's very important. And what is your role, especially the role of AgUnity in this? Which are some example of solution and project that you have helped farmers in adapting to this new regulation, but also supporting farmers concretely?
At the moment, as I started, we start with the cooperative or the producer organization. So we basically first digitize their member base. And we are doing this with cooperatives in, among others, Ethiopia, Tanzania, Uganda. We are also at the moment working with a few groups in Kenya. Oh no, we have even started onboarding one group. First, we digitize their member base. Based on that, and it depends how quick that goes, because sometimes there are already spreadsheets that we can use. Then it goes quick, of course. If that's not the case, then we might have to digitize paper-based records, or we even need to go into the field and just collect the data there. Once it's in our system, we start also collecting the GPS locations of the farmers by visiting the farmers in the field with a mobile app. Then we can also verify the already registered data, whether it's still up to date. And by the way, we prefer that cooperatives do this as much by themselves, because we cannot go everywhere ourselves, especially when we are talking about who pays. So then we have a data set in a secure environment. And because another problem that I learned that quite often occurs is data gets corrupted, which is kept in spreadsheets, or a computer gets a virus, they have to start all over again, all the data gone again. So we store it safely on the cloud. So also if someone leaves, that's another story that we have heard, a cooperative manager left or was replaced, all the data gone. So we store it on the cloud. It will always be available for the people who should have access to it. Well protected and kept secure and clean. So once this data is all there, you will be able to start using it for reporting towards your buyers. If your buyers want to see, okay, which farmers are you working with? Are they deforestation free? And then you can show the locations of your farmers, verified with an external service that we are using, the geo information, and they can prove that the farmers they work with are safe. Now, then during the harvest, the coffee will be recorded. So if a farmer brings their coffee to the collection point or a washing station, they will be verified and they need to be in our system, sell their coffee to us. So we register that transaction and they will weigh the coffee. If that's a digital scale, we can directly get that value to the mobile application. There will be some kind of a handshake. If the farmer has a smartphone, they can use their smartphone for the digital handshake. Otherwise, it will be a membership card to really make sure which farmer has been delivering this coffee. There will be some analysis running in the background. So if a farmer brings way too much coffee, there will be an alert. And this will be never ever 100% error prone, of course, but some analysis need to run into the background to be sure that strange things are not happening. The same we will do with the total production of the washing station, because you roughly know how much dry green bean you will get out of the process when you have a certain amount of berries going into the process. So those kind of analysis will also be run to make sure, or as sure as possible, that the process at that washing station is trustworthy, because that's the information that basically we need to provide towards the buyers. These kind of digitization processes we are at the moment doing with one of the largest coffee cooperatives in Africa, in Ethiopia, Oromia Coffee Farmers Cooperative Union. There we also are now onboarding the data of the second and the third largest union. So yeah, in total, that's already becoming quite a huge amount of farmers. Now, next to that, we are doing the same in other countries. But not limited to coffee. We do the same in vegetables, although not under EUDR. In general, we see a increased demand for transparency of origin of products. And that we are, for example, doing in cooperation with a large retailer in South Africa who really want to buy from smallholders, but they also want to see that regenerative agriculture is taking place and that is being reported, and they want to see which farmers are providing the vegetables, etc., etc. So you see it across products. But of course, the focus at the moment is very much on EUDR and products related to EUDR. And that's why we have a focus on coffee right now.
It's a very interesting technology and work, and I'm sure also you can enhance also transparency in the chain, having digital payments and work which can also support the farmer. I want to push an hard question. I mean, it's very wonderful. Consumer maybe can track on a QR code where the coffee is coming in the future, but I want to ask, who pays all of this awful amount of work that farmers and cooperatives to do and all the system? And is there also these additional costs translate to better prices along all the value chain? So especially for the farmers.
Yeah, that last question, will that mean a better price for their coffee, is still to be seen, because we don't know yet. We have seen a few coffee buyers who were willing to add a premium on top of the coffee, but that's really a small amount of buyers that I have heard doing that or willing to do it, because some already were doing it thinking that EUDR would be in place from this December. But in general, I've heard more, let's call them gossips, through traders, that their buyers are not willing to pay additionally for EUDR compliance, because they have sounded like that we didn't decide for EUDR compliance, but at the same time that farmer also didn't decide for EUDR compliance. But we are in fact demanding quite serious investments from maybe not the individual farmer, but for sure from the farmer organizations to prove their compliance. And at the moment, there is nobody really willing to pay. The farmers claim they cannot pay, which I presume is partially the case. At the same time, you could also say, hey, if you run as a farmer organization, if you run this as a business, then it's a business investment to continue having access to a certain market. But that's a very delicate topic to discuss. And I see that there is quite some hesitation to start doing something as long as the funding is not fully clear. So many producer organizations are really hoping that someone will step in to pay. We see some initiatives by NGOs who are working with farmer groups who support their farmer groups. We see development organizations stepping in now. UNDP, for example, has a big tender in Ethiopia at the moment to support the digital onboarding of a large amount of farmers. The EU has some budgets available. They claim, at least. I have not yet managed to get any budget out of that for farmer groups we are working with, but they claim to have a budget to support some groups to get EUDR ready. But all these funds will not be enough to get all smallholder farmers in all the commodities that this involves to be ready on time, I'm afraid. And that's a problem, especially when, as a farmer, you don't know if your farmer organization, your investment will pay off. And that's a tough message. So we have been supporting a lot of farmer groups with rather small donor funds. And we have done it a lot on our own cost, thanks to our investors, let's say, that we have, assuming that after a while, there will be earning models around this digitization. And we see the interest of banks and insurance companies to start providing services once these farmer groups have been digitized. We see the possibilities of digital money introduction, but still that will take quite a while, because then the farmer will need a smartphone as well. And in many regions, that's still not a fact. So we for sure foresee earning models in the near future. But at the moment, hardly anybody is willing to pay this digital, so much needed digital transformation, because otherwise it's going to be really tough. And the consumer might not even realize that this is all playing in the background, because if you would ask the consumer, maybe they would be willing to add a few cents to their coffee, which basically directly would pay and would have the potential to pay this full digitization process. and really give us a lot more insight in a lot more value chains. So yeah, that's a problem not yet solved.
Fantastic. No, it's really an interesting proposition, which is also connected and with the work that we are doing, especially I am doing with small scale farmer. So the transformation discussion about digitize, the insurance, the work, especially it's an interesting discussion. And one of the challenges is sometimes even with our more simpler monitoring and evaluation work and it's data collection challenges. So sometimes we had challenges and obstacles with smallholder farmers. What have you done to how you and also how technology mitigates those challenges?
Yeah, I'm not going to say that technology will definitely mitigate all those challenges because although I'm a technological guy from my background, I'm a sociologist as well, and technology push is not always necessarily the best solution, or very often it's not. I would dare saying, if you don't care about how you implement, how you help people, it could even fire back then that it will really support things, because it's also scary, right? If you are not used to digital, it's quite scary. As we could see, for example, with the example of let's take a picture of your ownership document, and yeah, then they are afraid that fraud can take place. But you are right. Data collection is for many reasons important. It would be very beneficial for the country, for the National Trade Organization, the Ministry of Agriculture. We also have been discussing in Ghana, for example, with an organization that produces reliable rice varieties. They don't have any idea how much seed there is needed to grow enough rice, because they don't know what will be the demand from the farmers, because they don't know how many farmers there are and how much land there is available for rice production, etc., etc. And so enabling digital data collection from farmers will make a lot of lives easier. Take also the, and I think you were partially referring to that, the efforts needed for certification. And many farmer organizations want to be certified for example, fair trade or Rainforest Alliance or organic, because certain consumers also love to buy those kind of certified products, hoping that with doing so they do good and they add something to the farmers, which in several of these programs is really the case. In others, maybe not, but that could be a different discussion for a completely different podcast. But becoming certified is really costly for these farmer organizations, because very often now an auditor has to visit them. That's a person from abroad who needs to be paid in foreign currency, because these organizations want that auditor to be paid in dollars or euros. But yeah, they have a local currency, which very often is not that valuable. So getting certified or being recertified, because they also have to do this every year, is very costly. And what we are now working on in Uganda is to digitize the whole organic certification process, but we can do the same for others. To hopefully allowing these certification bodies to spend less money on the certification process, so that maybe for the farmer organizations, being certified can also be cheaper, because at the moment it's highly doubtful that they will earn enough premium money to pay off the cost of the certificate. Because let's just take organic. I'm organic certified. I have to do that before I harvest. Not to speak about the fact that it might also take 5 years before I can become organic certified, because my soil has to be clean. So then finally I'm organic certified. Is there anybody guaranteeing the farmer that they can sell their produce as organic with premium money? Nobody. And so if I cannot sell my, let's say, coffee as organic coffee, then I might have to decide to sell it as non-certified. So I even don't get the premium money that I was hoping to get after my investment, right? So the whole certification mechanism And there are many good things behind it, don't get me wrong. But take, for example, coffee in Ethiopia. The majority of coffee is by default organic. And because people have been growing this in their garden, there has been no fertilizer usage because they cannot afford it. They use compost, etc., etc., etc. But to be able to sell their coffee as organic, they need to be certified, which has a high cost, and it's highly doubtful that they will ever earn that back. So we really hope that digitization might support these kind of certification processes, or maybe it will result in a completely different transparency format, that we don't need certification, but that buyers will just say, and that's a discussion we are having with a cocoa buyer in Denmark at the moment. Maybe we can just come up with a statement that thanks to the transparency, there is sufficient evidence to say that this, in their case, cocoa, is organic, that we are not going to demand fair trade rainforest or organic certification, which is highly very costly for these farmers. So maybe digitization will also result in different forms of transparency, which might result in a better price for the farmer. But that's wishful thinking. But those are things we are working on as well.
Fantastic. And it's really a very interesting and dense discussion. And I want to close with the final question about the future. I mean, looking ahead, all these technological advantages and then all this transformation, how do we envision really this role of technology in supporting those value chains, and which tangible also effects you foresee happening in the future?
Yeah, I think it will still take a while. At the same time, we will see in the media a lot of examples of application of newest technology in certain settings. You can already see application of AI, application of drones, but those are all rather small pilots. If you see it at the full scale of agriculture, it will take a while, because the money is just not in the system to afford all these kind of technology. Because bringing in drones, it's nice for a pilot. Then you can also send someone there, handle the drone. But all these kind of pilot projects very often don't continue because there is not enough local knowledge to maintain these kind of technologies. So before there is enough local knowledge and expertise, and I think we should basically target the younger generation there to get involved. It might also be a way to keep them in the village and prevent that they will run away to the city, hoping that they can find better jobs there. New technology might be a way to involve the younger generation in and keep them interested in agriculture. But at the same time, I'm also not sure that technology will be the solution for all. There is a disadvantage of smallholder farming, and that's the scale. It's rather inefficient. At the same time, we need it for biodiversity, because it has a way richer biodiversity than the large, massive fields. So if we want to keep it like this, and I think there are many reasons to do that, then we need to be willing to invest and pay a better price. And we have to get used to the fact that coffee and things like that cannot be really cheap in the shop. But at the moment, the majority of consumers is probably looking for the lowest price they can get a product for. That will have to change. That is not sustainable, and that's in many areas not sustainable. The same with what chicken do you want to buy? If you want to have a very cheap chicken, then you don't want to know how it has been grown. The same with coffee, vegetables, other commodities. If you want to have a high quality product without pesticides, without chemical fertilizer, etc., so a really healthy, nutritious product, then we need to be willing to pay. And if we are willing to pay, then with digital tooling, we can make things more efficient, more effective, more resilient. Because, of course, if you can monitor an area with drones, or maybe even with satellite images like we are currently doing, then you can have early warning systems for pests that are taking place. If you can quickly isolate, hey, something is going wrong in a certain field, at a certain place in the field there, then you can prevent that the whole harvest will go bad. If you notice that somewhere there is a drought problem, then a quick intervention there can prevent that too much harvest will get lost. So we can do a lot with technology by observation, by soil testing. We think that, for example, the coffee production can quickly increase by really basic soil testing. We don't need very fancy devices for it. You can just use a few tubes and you know already enough. At the moment, farmers are putting compost on the field, thinking they are doing the right thing, but we don't know the chemical consistency of the soil, right? It's a big chemical factory, and nothing bad about that, right? Because that's just natural. But if the pH level is not correct, you can put a lot of compost on it, but plants will never be able to absorb the nutrition, all the nutrition in the soil. So the land might need some preparation, for example, by adding simple things like chicken poo they can maybe get from their neighbor, to make that plants can better use all the nutrients in the field. Those kind of simple interventions can already mean massive productivity improvements. So to do that, you don't need fancy technologies. Big steps can be made with really simple interventions. But on top of that, I think a lot of digital interventions, which will probably now just be tested on rather small scale environments, will have massive impact in the longer run.
Fantastic, Peter. Thank you so much with this wonderful episode. And it's really been, I think, a lesson, and it will be very useful for our listeners. It's been a pleasure and honor having you.
It was great being here. Thank you for having me.
Are you satisfied after this wonderful episode? Let's continue together our sustainability journey.